Okay, I have a nice difficult topic for you today, parallelism. This is really for helping your style. I think people make mistakes with this kind of thing when they're speaking all the time. Native speakers, of course, I'm talking about here. And it's because it's very difficult to speak with a certain style all the time, and this is a very nice style of either speaking or writing. You very often see it in literature, in poetry, in speeches, political speeches. You certainly see these parallel forms, and so they're considered very persuasive, and they enhance your skill with a language. They certainly make the sentence look more beautiful and sound more beautiful, particularly in poetry. Anyway, we're going to look at some of the situations when we use parallel forms. Today we're just looking at lists, and we're also going to look at prepositions in lists, and we're even going to look at a correlative conjunction. But I'm going to go into more detail in future lessons on correlative conjunctions, because they're very difficult, and parallelism is very difficult. But firstly, let's go into what is parallelism. So generally, what parallelism is when you have items in a list, they all ought to be the same kind of words. So the items in a list ought to all be clauses, or they ought to all be gerunds, or they ought to all be noun phrases, or they ought to all be adjectives, or maybe all adverbs, and that's all parallelism is. So let's look at the first one. There are going to be mistakes all the way down here, and we're going to try and correct the mistakes because I think it's the best way of understanding parallelism. So I didn't know what to do, colon. The colon introduces a list. To read a book, watch a film, or go to bed. Now the problem here is that we have three forms in the list. We have go, watch, and to read. Now I hope it's pretty obvious to you quite quickly that to read is the problem. And if we just take out that to, then it starts to read more beautifully. It sounds better. I didn't know what to do. Read a book, watch a film, or go to bed. We could change this into a different form, but here they're all in the infinitive forms, and so they're all parallel. That's all it means here. So let's look at the next list. He is nasty, arrogant, and hates sharing. Now this isn't correct because we have this is nasty, is arrogant, and is hates sharing. Now that's where the problem is. So the problem is certainly in this last word. We need to get rid of the verb and the gerund, which comes after the verb, and we need to change it into the same kind of word as this one and this one. And these two are adjectives. So I would use the adjective, which means hates sharing, and we have a number of adjectives for hates sharing, but I think the most common one is actually stingy. Although mean and greedy are also very common. And so he's nasty, arrogant, and stingy works much better than he's nasty, arrogant, and hates sharing. Okay, look at the next list. She likes jogging, reading, and to go to the gym on Sundays. Now I hope you'll realise that that's a gerund, and then that's 2 plus infinitive. And so it sounds much better to keep the elements in the list in the same structure. So we'll get rid of to go, and we'll make it going. Okay, she likes jogging, reading, and going to the gym on Sundays. Please keep these elements in a list in the same forms. Okay, now we're going to look at an auxiliary verb here. This would encourage investment. This would improve communication. And this would and could increase profit. This is obviously the problem here. I hope you can see that we've got three verbs, encourage, improve, and increase. And if we're going to use them in a list, that means that would modifies encourage, would modifies improve, and would should modify increase. But this could is in the way. So I would get rid of it. It makes it, it breaks the parallel structure. We need to keep it with would encourage, would improve, and would increase profit. I hope that makes sense. It wouldn't be good here to use, say, has been or has increased profit. That would certainly be wrong also. And it's because we're using present perfect here, but we're using infinitives here. And present perfect can't be used after would anyway. Okay, look at the next one. He spoke loudly and with fluency. Now, this one's really quite subtle. I think we can all understand that there is a way of making this sound a little bit more fluent, a little bit nicer and a little bit more natural, and that is to keep the ly and get rid of that preposition. Yeah, fluently. I can just change that like that. It's fluently. He spoke loudly and fluently, and it sounds much better. The rhythm of the language sounds better, and that's why this isn't only for writing. It is for writing, and it's very important in some exams. For example, the GMAT exam, it seems to be very keen on improving the use of parallelism, and good for them because it is good and it does add to your language. So it's not just for writing. You know, it's always the case that if you can speak it correctly, you can write it correctly. And so if you start using this in your speech, it will improve your writing too. So they moved slowly and spoke in a quiet manner. I hope you can see that this is the parallel structure we want to repeat on both sides of the and. And by the way, when you want to look for parallelism, if you want to look for mistakes in your writing with this, look for the and the ors, because it's on both sides of conjunctions that you very often see these mistakes. So they moved slowly and spoke in a quiet manner. I hope you can see that it's much easier to just say spoke quietly. And then we have the repetition of the adverbs, yeah? So not that in a quiet manner, but he spoke loudly and fluently, they moved slowly and spoke quietly. It repeats and sounds nice. You've got past tense adverb, past tense adverb. It's nice. Nice structure. Okay, on to prepositions now, and prepositions can get really quite confusing, or I certainly find them confusing, but let's try and straighten them out. So, I looked in my bag, my coat, and under the bed. This is actually wrong. You are saying I looked in my bag, in my coat, and in under the bed. And that doesn't make sense. You can't have in under, and that's the problem with this one. If this was in the bed, there's a couple of ways we can clear this up and improve this mistake. Correct this mistake. We could take away under, but then it changes the meaning. In my bag, in my coat, and in my bed, in the bed. Yeah, so we could just take off under, but it changes the meaning. To keep the meaning the same, we have to add a second preposition here. I looked in my bag, in my coat, and under the bed, and then it becomes correct. Okay, but when you've just got one preposition here and it's being repeated here in the list, in under, that doesn't make any sense. And it's a similar mistake in number 2. I was both excited and surprised at the names on the list. The problem is the two adjectives take different prepositions. We say excited about, and so excited at doesn't make any sense. And so we do need to include that excited about and surprised at, the names on the list. Okay, look at this one. I do that in summer and in winter. Now this is technically correct, but with parallelism we don't have to repeat the in twice. We can take off that in summer and winter. Of course, now we can't do it if it's like in number 1 where there's a second preposition spoiling things, because then we'd have in under. But in a simple sentence like this where in summer and in winter work, we don't need to repeat it twice. We can just take off the second in. Okay, we agreed on where to meet and that we should come alone. Now there's a problem here that we agreed on is being used with that. We agreed on that we should come alone. It's fine here, but it doesn't work here. And so we need to change it. We need to change it quite a bit, in fact, this one. We could say, we agreed on meeting here and coming alone, because then we're using meeting and coming on both sides of the conjunction. So that's one way of doing it. Or we could use that twice. We could say we agreed that we meet here and and come alone, or that we come alone, but you can get rid of that we come because you're using the same forms. So we agreed that we meet here and come alone, meet and come. Yeah, you're still keeping it parallel. Okay, lastly, I'll give you a little taster on what I'm going to do with correlative conjunctions. We're going to look at these. We're going to examine and scrutinize these because these are hard. But just look at this last sentence. I'd like a bit of either steak or pork. Simple sentence, right? We're joining either X or Y together. The problem is when you add the preposition of. There's a number of different possibilities now. Of either steak or pork is correct because the of when it's outside the either, it refers to both. And so that's okay when it's outside the either. But when it's on the other side of the either, you need it twice. You need of steak or of pork because it only refers to that one when it's on that side of the either. And so either of steak or pork is wrong, because that only refers to this one. Okay, it only refers to the steak, so that's wrong. And of either steak or of pork is wrong because we've got of either on one side and then we've got or of on that side, so they're on the wrong sides. They've got to be both on the same side, of either or. It's not parallel, it's in the wrong position. So you can't have this one either. Okay, I hope that's clear. Please ask questions under the video, and please follow this series if you're interested in more information about parallelism, because I will go into further detail in future lessons. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all soon.